In the book of Psalm 60, verse 7, going down to 12, it begins to tell us prophetically about the nations that God was speaking to directly at the time. He was speaking in a grandeur context, speaking to David, his servant, and he was telling him that Gilead is mine and Manasseh is mine. And he said, Ephraim is the strength of my head, and Judah is my lawgiver. And it says, Moab is my washpot. Over Edom will I cast my shoe. And it says, Philistia, triumph because of me. And then it goes on to say that who will go into the strong city of Edom? Will not thou, O God? This is now David speaking directly to God. He says that, God, you cast us away and you didn't go with us in battle. You didn't go with our armies. And he basically ended up saying that God will help us to triumph over our enemies because the help of man is vain. And they said, through God, we will do valiantly against our enemies. David is saying a lot of different things. The first few things he said is about the nations and the tribes. So Gilead is basically one of the small cities, I believe, in Israel. It's not a tribe necessarily, but it's a part of Israel. So he says, Gilead is mine, meaning that I have control over Gilead. And it says, Manasseh is mine. So Manasseh is the half tribe of Joseph. So he's saying Manasseh is also mine. But then it says Ephraim is the strength of my head. This is very important because in the days of Genesis, when Joseph was going to meet his father Jacob after they had been separated for so long, for over 12 years because of what happened with the brothers and him being sold to the Ishmaelites and going into Egypt. Because of that, he had to go meet his dad, and his dad had to bless his children. So Jacob had grandchildren, and Joseph's children were Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh was the older one. So basically, when it was time for Jacob to die, they met together at a certain point in time before Jacob died. And Joseph wanted to give Manasseh to the right hand of Jacob and Ephraim to the left hand, because remember, Manasseh is older than Ephraim. But what Jacob did is that he switched his hands around, and Joseph tried to remove his hands from the right of from the head of Ephraim and put it on the head of Manasseh. But Jacob told Joseph that, I know this is what God is saying. I know what you're trying to do, but this is what God is saying, that the younger will be greater than the older. So this is not just something that happened with Jacob and Esau. It continued down to Ephraim and Manasseh. That's why the scripture says in Psalm 60 that even though Manasseh is mine, Ephraim is the strength of my head. So that means Ephraim has a higher portion with God. Ephraim becomes, at that point in time, a firstborn. Basically, Ephraim took the position now of the firstborn. So it goes on to say, Moab is my washpot. This is important because in the days of old, the king of Moab was subject to David because David had conquered them. And whenever a nation conquers another nation, that nation becomes subject to the other nation that conquered it. So the king of Moab was giving David and the people of Israel goods and things like that. Even in 2 Kings chapter 3, it tells you that the king of Moab was giving them 100,000 lambs and rams every certain period of time. Every period of time, maybe not have been every year, but every period of time they would give them a lot of goods. So because of that, they were upset at Israel, and they always tried to rebel against Israel, and they actually succeeded sometimes to rebel. So you need to make sure that you don't let the enemy contend against you and succeed. And before I get into that, it basically tells us more that Moab is the washpot. So what it's trying to say is that God has control over Moab. God can use Moab for whatever he wants to use it for, because Moab disobeyed God. Moab is basically a nation born out of incest, out of an incestuous relationship with Lot and his daughter. So because of that, that's why God basically used them as a means to basically judge them and basically use them to bring his glory to the land of Israel and to the whole world. So it says, over Edom will I cast my shoe. So it's like, for example, if a parent is trying to basically discipline a child and he throws a shoe at you, or if your mom throws her shoes at you, it's a method of discipline. So he's saying that Edom will be disciplined by God, because Edom was a nation that was an enemy of Israel as well. They mocked Israel and they basically disrespected Israel a lot, and they always tried to contend against Israel. So that's why the scripture says in Isaiah chapter 63 verse 1 that who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah, this that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength, I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. It's talking about God coming down with a red garment because he has judged the nation of Edom. So it's very important because this scripture tells us that Edom becomes a place of which God will cast a shoe. And it goes on to say that God left the armies of Israel because they didn't trust in him, because vain is the help of man. So whenever you trust in man, you are basically trusting in yourself. You're trusting in somebody like you, and that's why it's vain. It's like an inevitable curse. So that's why God left them, and God waited for them to acknowledge him. And then it says that through God we shall do valiantly and overcome our enemies. So you need to make sure that you trust in God in every second of your life, because that's what's going to help you to overcome all your enemies. And make sure you are aligned with the will of God. Make sure that you listen to what God is telling you for every decision that you want to make, every big decision, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's marriage, whether it's career, and even the small ones. Because when you show that you care even about the small things, then he will give you more when you ask for the bigger things. That's why it says, he that is faithful in least will be faithful in more. He that is unfaithful in least will be unfaithful in more. So God is speaking of his judgment towards the nation, and he's saying that if Israel trusts in God, then they will do valiantly, they will do mightily, because in the last days you will have more and more enemies. Darkness will become so replete, it will become so much sufficient for the people of darkness. But light in you has to be overcoming the darkness that is around you, and the only way you can overcome them is if you have the power of God working in your favor. And that's why the scripture tells us that when you trust in God, you do valiantly over your enemies. So God bless you, and I hope this blessed you. Have a wonderful day.